MongoDB is a widely used NoSQL database software. While Node.js is by far the most popular language to use MongoDB with, there also exists a library to use MongoDB in C++. Today, we'll make use of the mongocxx library to interact with MongoDB, and in the following video, we'll take what we've made here and build a REST API to have a running server that takes CRUD operations with both the REST API and MongoDB code written in C++. Characters from the Mario Kart game have been around for almost 3 decades. Let's use MongoDB to create a database that holds information about Mario Kart characters. Each entry in the database will hold things like character name, size, and the number of wins they have. We will use the mongocxx library to read, write, edit, and delete data from the database. Please check the video's description for what you will need for this tutorial, as well as all the video's code. To get started, open up a VS Code window and select the folder that you want to write all of your project code in. For example, I went into Documents and created mongocxx-example. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this prompt here with Control-Shift-P, and I'm just going to type easy, and we're going to use the easy C++ VS Code extension to create a new C++ project. It's going to prompt you for an OS, and we're on Linux, so I'm going to do Linux. And you'll see that we have this file structure here, which we're going to preserve throughout the entire video. And inside this main CPP, simple print statement. One thing to note here is this makefile, and it's to help us compile code using make commands, for example, make run. And what we're going to do is instead we're going to take a makefile that I've created for this project, and all of these links are going to be in the description. Copy it, and we're going to paste it. It's just going to help us compile so that we can include our libraries that we're using. And just to make sure everything works, just type make run. What this is going to do is it's going to compile the entire project, and then we should get a print statement just like the main CPP has, hello easy C++ with no errors. So that's great. Next thing is we're going to create a bash script to set up the mongocxx library. So in the topmost directory right here, I'm going to do setup-mongocxx. And then I'm just going to grab this content here. Again, this is going to be in the description. Paste it, save it. Notice if you reopen it, it automatically gets colors and whatnot, which is pretty cool. To run this in the bash shell, first I'm going to mark it as an executable. So I'm going to do sudo chmod +x setup-mongocxx. And it's going to ask me for my password since I'm using sudo. And after I do that, I should be able to do /setup-mongocxx, and it should run. And this setup process might take 5 minutes, but I'm going to just stop it since I've already ran this myself. Next thing we can do is we can go ahead and start writing some code. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a MongoDB handler.h, or h, sorry, not JS. And in here I'm just going to define a simple class and have some includes that we're going to need to get started. So first I'm going to include the stdint. This is so that we can use integers smaller than 32 bits for like storing the number of wins a character has. And we're also going to include strings since we're going to be working with strings. Next, I will up top also have to do an include guard here, so you can just do pragma once. This is just for the compiler. Next thing is I'm going to define a namespace, and I'm just going to call it learning. The reason why I'm defining a namespace here is just to keep things organized. Now that that's good, inside I'm going to define a class, which is going to hold our MongoDB stuff, and I'm going to call it MongoDB handler. I'm following the Google style guide for C++. I'll link that also in the description. It's just something to follow, a standard as we go along creating this. So let's create 3 functions. So first one's going to be all 3 are going to return booleans, and one's going to be for adding, editing, and deleting characters from the database. So this one can just be add character to DB. It'll take 3 parameters, like we mentioned before in the introduction to this video, and they're all going to be const reference. This is so that the compiler doesn't have to copy the values that we send in, when we call this function. Just slight optimization. So character name, that's the first one. And for the next parameter, what I'm going to do is it's going to be a string again. This is going to be for character size. And you guessed it, it's going to be const reference. And then the last one, I'm going to just have it a 16-bit integer, and it'll just be the number of wins they have for, initially saving it. And we can go ahead and write all the code in here, but instead I'm just going to return true for now, since I'm just going to build out the shell of this class before I go ahead and give any body to these functions. Next one will be for editing characters. So it's going to be Boolean and then just update wins. And it's going to take a string reference again. And this can just be the character ID, since we're going to look up characters by their IDs. When we store data to MongoDB, it creates an auto-generated ID, and we can use that to look up certain characters in the database and edit or delete them. And same thing, I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's very similar. But instead of update wins, this is just going to be remove character from DB. Okay, great. Now that that's done, our class has its shell, it's built out, which is great. And we did mention earlier that the characters can have one of three sizes: small, medium, or large. And since we're storing them as a string, you could technically send in something like taco here, right? And it would get stored, but really we want to enforce those three types. So I'm going to create a second header file called charactersize.h. And what this is going to hold is it's going to be an enum class for the three types. Remember, we need that include guard up here for the compiler. We're going to throw it again in a namespace. Learning. And then down here I'm going to define our class. So enum class, I'm going to call it character size. And inside this enum we're going to have three types. When you're naming constants with the Google Style Guide, all of the variable names start with K, just for readability. So that if you see K at the beginning of a variable, it's a constant. So K small, K medium, and K large are going to be the three sizes. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to map these enumerated types to strings, and I'm going to use an unordered map for that. So up here, I'm going to just include a standard header that comes with C++. And it's going to be unordered map. And then down here, we're going to define this unordered map within a namespace, of course. So std unordered map. And I'm just going to, before we give it a name, we have to specify what we're mapping. So we're mapping character size to a string, but you can also do const char pointer. It's the same thing. And I'm going to name this map character size to string. And to define a map on one line, or all in one go, you use open parentheses and then open curly brace. And then inside this is where we're going to define the things that we're mapping. So first one is character size K small, and we're mapping that, let's just say, to just small in all lowercase. And I'm going to do this, I'm just going to copy and paste this 3 times to help speed up, how we go about, defining this, save some time. And then K large is going to map to large, just like above, medium's mapping to medium. Okay, now that our map is out of the way, let's go hop back in our MongoDB handler class, and let's start building this out. In the Google Style Guide, usually the first, you have your standard headers, you do a white space or a blank line, and then you start including any extra libraries that you have but aren't part of the standard library. So for example, we're going to start including our mongocxx headers here. Along with mongocxx comes another library or module called bsoncxx, and we're going to include one thing from here: builder stream document, and this is so that we can create documents that we can pass into mongocxx, and they'll get written to the database. More on that later as we write it. Next one will be bsoncxx JSON, and then we're also going to include bsoncxx OID. This is so that we can look up things by their IDs. Okay, after we've included the bson stuff, let's go ahead and include the Mongo. I'm going in alphabetical order, by the way, for our includes. So this is mongocxx. We need client, and then we're going to need include mongocxx database, and then finally we will get include mongocxx URI. And these last three here are going to be class variables so that we can make a connection to our database. Awesome. Now that's out of the way, I'm going to add two keywords in this class. First one will be public. So we'll have public things in this class, and we'll also have some private fields. The things that we're going to define as private down here are just three class variables, and that's going to be mongocxx URI. I'm just going to call it URI. That's the first one. mongocxx client. Oops, client, and then mongocxx database DB. Okay. These three variables are going to get initialized in a constructor, which I'm going to define up here. So you can just type MongoDB handler, and then you can define them all on one line with this colon here. Comes very handy for C++. But I'm going to make a new line just for added readability. I'll put the colon down here. And then what we're going to initialize the variables to are going to be, I should first define some constant strings up here because we're going to use them down here in this constructor. Okay, so now up here, I'm going to define three constants, and I'm going to do const expr so that it's evaluated at compile time. It'll be a char array in the database, the variable name that we're going to start with is kmongodb URI, and it's an array of characters like a string. And since MongoDB is going to be running locally, I can just do 0000, and the default port is 27017. Next constant variable I'm going to do is const expr char, and we'll do k database name. This is going to be the name of our database that you can find in MongoDB. I'm just going to call it learning mongocxx. And then finally we're going to create a collection name. So char k collection name, and this is just going to be Mario Kart characters, like so. Just double check our spelling. Everything looks good. Now we can go ahead and finish our constructor. So the first thing that we'll initialize is going to be the URI, and that'll take a mongocxx URI, and then we'll just pass in the k MongoDB URI like we have above. Next thing is going to be the client, and client will just take mongocxx client, and then we're going to pass in the URI that we just defined. And then finally is the DB class name, so that'll just take client, and after doing so, array brackets, and we're going to pass in the k database. I didn't put name up here. Okay, let's fix that. K database name. Great, open and close brackets, and that should be good to go. Now that our constructor is done, and hopefully VS Code updates so that it takes away these names here, or these, not sure why that's still there, but anyway. Next thing is we can start our add character to DB function so that we can write data to the database. mongocxx collection, and I'm defining a collection variable here because this is going to keep track of the collection that we're trying to write to. So k collection name. Next thing is I'm going to create a builder variable, but I'm going to give its type auto because I don't feel like writing it out, and the builder is going to hold a document that we create, and the document is what we're going to be writing to the collection every time we call this add character to DB function. So it takes bson cxx builder stream document, then open and closing brackets like that. And down here is where we're going to create our document that we want to write to MongoDB. So we can start with bson cxx document value, and this variable I'll just call doc to add. So we use the builder variable we had up here, and we're using ostream operators to start this key value pair stuff. So character name, we'll just map to character name. And then size, I'll do it down here. Size will map to size. And then finally wins will map to wins. And then to mark that the document is closed now, we'll do bson cxx builder stream finalize. That's it. Alright, now that our document has been created, last step is to use the collection variable up here to add the document to the database. So collection.insert1, and then we're going to just take this doc to add variable, right? And then we're going to just do .view as a function. And after doing so, we should have inserted the document to the database. So going back in our main file, there's two things we need to include. The first one is going to be an instance that's part of the mongocxx library. And the next thing is going to be the class, of course, if we haven't included it yet. So that's just MongoDB handler.h. And down here, first we're going to define an instance variable, mongocxx instance. And I'm going to name it instance. And the next one's going to be in the learning namespace that we've created. Learning, MongoDB handler, and I'm just going to call it mhandler. Since the constructor takes no parameters, we don't need parentheses here. Lucky us. Let me spell this correctly. Okay, mhandler. Great. Next thing is we'll call our function that we just created, mhandler.add character to DB, and let's add a character called Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong. And in the game, Donkey Kong is the large character. So what do we pass in as an enum? It's going to be learning, character size, k large, and then we'll just give him 0 wins because he's just starting out. So let's test this out and see if it worked. I'm over here. I don't see the database yet because we haven't run it. So now let's run it and let's see what happens. So make run. Let's make sure we get no errors. Boom, it ran. Still get the hello easy C++ project. If I do show DBs, you can see learning mongocxx is there. So if I do learn use and then the name, if I do show collections, you can see Mario Kart characters are there. So db.MarioKartCharacters.find, and we'll see that Donkey Kong was actually added. We see character name mapped to Donkey Kong, size mapped to large, and wins mapped to 0. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more characters for fun. So we'll do Mario. I'd say he's medium. Okay, medium. And let's say he also has 0 wins. And then I'm going to add 1 more person, which, oh yeah, don't forget a semicolon here. Let's add, who's a small character? I'm going to do Dry Bones. And he's K small, just to make sure all this works. And Dry Bones has 90 wins somehow, because he's really good. So make run, let's do this again. Ready? Let it run. Come back here. Let's do Mario Kart characters.find. Boom. We can see this is the new query. We have Donkey Kong, large. Mario has medium. Dry Bones is small, and he has 90 wins. Awesome. So our write function works. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the update wins. And it's a lot similar to what we did before with those documents, except now we're kind of doing 2 documents. One's for querying or trying to find someone with the character ID, and the second document is for the update. So very similar protocol to above. I'm actually just going to steal it. I don't feel like rewriting it. We need the collection variable and the builder again. So collection and builder. And then we're going to create our first document. You know what? I'm going to just steal this again. Doc to add. Instead, I'm going to call this the query doc, since that's like the thing that we're going to look up by. And down here, we're going to use builder. And instead, the ID field we're looking up by. And the ID is going to be this character ID parameter that we sent in, right? So I'm just going to do document ID, or sorry, character ID. And we can't quite pass in the character ID this way. There's one more thing we have to do, which is use the OID header that we included up top. So we're going to do bson cxx OID. I'm going to call it document ID here. And this is just going to take in the character ID as a parameter. It translates, or casts the string here to this OID value, which is what the mongocxx will accept. So paste that in, and then after doing so, we can finalize the document. And very similar to how we did it before. So do bson cxx. What's the next namespace? It's builder. stream, finalize. Cool. So that's our query doc done. And then we're also going to do our update doc. So I'm just going to steal this again. Why not? So I'm going to call this update doc now. And this one's obviously going to be different. We're going to use $inc, which means increment. We're going to increment the number of wins by 1. So increment, we have to open up another kind of sub-document, if that makes sense. So mongocxx, builder, stream, open document. And then inside is where we can take the number of wins, and then we're going to increment them by 1. And then after doing so, we can take this. But instead of open document, you guessed it, it's close document. So close document, and then finalize, because that's at the end of every single document that we defined. Finally, we can do an update one on the collection. So collection.update1, and it takes 2 parameters. The first one's going to be the query doc.view, and the second one it's going to take is the update doc.view. And I did mention that we are going to check the types here. And to check the type, what we can do is define this variable over here, and it's on the left side of this function call. So mongocxx, I'll make this on a new line. The variable will be equal to, or the variable's type is mongocxx stdx. Optional, then it takes a like a template. And the optional value that could be returned is result update. And I'm just going to call it maybe result, because these functions to read and write to the database, they might return something and they might not. So that's why you cast it here. And if it does return something, we're expecting this type. And then down here, instead of the default return, we can do if. I'm going to pass in here maybe result. So if there was something returned, then we can return if maybe result points to a field called modified count. And if the modified count is 1, meaning that something did update, then we'll return true. If it wasn't 1, we'll return false. And then if there was no maybe result in the first place, we'll just return false by default. So there we go. I'd say our update wins function is ready to go. Let's go ahead and hop back into main.cpp. We have these characters here, Mario, Dry Bones, and whatnot. And we have their object IDs here when I look them up. So I'm just going to do a slight modification. Instead of adding characters, right, I'm going to do update wins. Remember, it takes a string parameter. And the string parameter I'm going to send in is this one, 6032, whatever, for Donkey Kong. And then we can also update Mario's. His is, oh no, that's Donkey Kong's again. There you go, this is Mario's right here. So I'll pass this one in. And just to see if they work, let's go ahead and create like a helper function to print if something worked or not. So I'm just gonna call it print result. It'll take a Boolean. I'll just do const reference, why not? And then it's also going to take a string parameter, and that can be a chart pointer, as mentioned before. So operation, and I'll just print out the operation worked or didn't work, if that makes sense. So std cout. Okay, std cout. Start with the space, and then operation. And then here's where we'll do the conditional worked or didn't work. So if there's a result, we'll do worked. Otherwise, I'll put a space over here. Otherwise, it didn't work, right? Didn't work. And make sure to put a space here as well. Cool. Let me do it like this, just for keeping things, not too wide, so that we can read them all without having to scroll, horizontally. And there we go. So let's go ahead and then create a Boolean right here. So bool results. right? And then I'm going to reassign result right here. And then in between each time we do something with the database, I'm going to just print it out. So result. And then I'll also, what's wrong here? Oh, we need one more thing. So update. And then print result again, result. And then I'm going to pass in update again. Hopefully, if things go as planned, they both should work. So by doing make run, they both worked. I should remove this, to be honest. Okay. So that worked. Let's go ahead and see if things updated. Ready? So you can see now that Mario and Donkey Kong have 1 win, as opposed to when I looked them up last time they had 0. And I can just rerun this executable like this. Bin main. Let's just run it a bunch of times. And after I run it a bunch of times, you can see now they have 12 wins. So they're catching up to Dry Bones. Although they're still very far, but you see it's possible. Now let's try to pass in a parameter that we know doesn't work. So let's just do 682. Instead of 82, let's do 83. Here we go. Ready? Make run. Let's go for it. 83. Is there somebody in here with 8? Oh my goodness. So it seems like I got really lucky, and their IDs are identical. It's just an 8-3. So let's do. I got so lucky there. Sorry. Well, let's try it again. Make run. This last update should not work. And as you can see, look, I even updated Dry Bones wins. So make run. Let's go again. Could not parse object ID. Oh right. The object IDs are expecting like numbers and letters at certain points. So if we don't, this wants a number here for this last character. So let's do it again. It should work. It needs a certain format. There we go. So you can see that this last ID didn't work. And we run it again. You can see that because we updated the first 2, Donkey Kong and Mario, they went up again. And Dry Bones stayed the same. So there you go. Our update function works. And finally, let's go work on our last function, which is going to be removing a character from the database. So now we're going to do Mongo. It's so similar to update. I'm honestly going to just copy again to make our life easier. We need these 3 variables, the collection, builder, and then the object ID, of course. And then I'm going to even take this one because this is the same query. We're still querying a Mario Kart character by its ID. It's the same exact thing, right? And then instead, we're going to do, check this out. I'm even going to take all this because it's so similar. It's not even worth rewriting. So pass that in. Remember this, oops, false by default. So what do we need to change here now that we've pasted in? The optional result is now, instead of update, it's delete result like that. And then collection, we're going to do delete 1. And we're only going to pass in the query doc, right? It's the same thing. And then if maybe result, all we're going to do now is delete count is 1. Very similar to what we did above. That's what's cool about MongoCxx. I appreciate them for that. Now, because we know result works for update, I'm going to do remove character from DB. And I'm going to also, so I'm going to remove, who is this? This is Donkey Kong's, right? 9BF2. Yeah, this is Donkey Kong. And then I'm going to try to remove an ID that doesn't exist. And let's see what happens. So here we go. Oops. Let's change this to say delete. All right, so clear. Let's rerun it. Here we go. So the delete worked and the delete didn't work. Let's see if Donkey Kong is still there. Oh man, as you can see with the new query right here, Donkey Kong's gone. Let me go ahead and get rid of Mario as well, just for fun. Everybody's going. Mario's going to go by, and Dry Bones is also going to go by. So I have their IDs in here. We're going to recompile and run it. Bye. It says it both worked. Dry Bones. Oh, whoops. I did update wins here. That's funny. So I gave Dry Bones an extra one. So I guess Dry Bones is going to get deleted with 92 wins. Just do this. We know this should fail. So it should say the delete didn't work, and then it should say the delete worked now. Great, as expected, since we already removed Mario, that's gone, and dry bones was there, so the delete worked for dry bones. If I go here, you can see there's nothing there, they're all gone. Great, so our MongoDB handler is done. In the next video, we will make a REST API for reading documents and doing all these operations behind an API.